Welcome to MMA Capital. I'm going to be your host, Ben. This video I'm going to be breaking down last week's UFC Fight Night, Garbrandt versus Font, as well as previewing UFC Fight Night, Rozenstruik versus Sakai. I hit on 3 of 5 of my predictions for Font versus Garbrandt, including predicting the main event and co-main correctly. So I'll be recapping that and then breaking down next week's Rozenstruik versus Sakai. I'm just going to keep it a buck, as they say. Next week's card might be the worst I've seen in a year or two, at least since the UFC restarted last March. So let's say like close to 2 full years. This card next week is awful. Rozenstruik versus Sakai. I think almost everyone on the main card is coming off a loss, so I guess the UFC just figured they'd dump pretty much everyone who's on a losing streak on this card. Is a really hardcore MMA fan and UFC fan. I would rarely say an entire card is trash, but next week's card is pretty trash, to be honest. I'm going to be on vacation in New York anyway, so I won't catch it, but yeah, awful card. Actually, surprisingly so. I think the only people who are ranked are in the main event. Everyone else is kind of straight up no names. Again, like I'd rarely say that an entire card is bad, but next week's is pretty bad. And I don't think I'm the only one who's commented on that it's particularly weak. I mean, the week after we have UFC 263, which is super stacked with like 2 title fights. So I guess put all their eggs in that UFC 263 basket, and then that Rozenstruik Sakai card is pretty bad. Honestly, if I wasn't on vacation in New York, I probably wouldn't watch it anyway and would just catch the highlights. It's how it's how weak it is, and some of these main event heavyweight title fights have been pretty bad lately. They've been super slow. Heavyweight might be like my least favorite division to watch for whatever reason. A lot of these top ranked heavyweights have been in really boring slow fights recently. It's like they don't get an early knockout and someone gets clipped early. It's like it's so slow watching heavyweights sometimes. So yeah, let me break down Font versus Garbrandt. I hit on 3 of 5 my picks, so let me run through this real quick. Again, back to that Rozenstruik versus Sakai card. Normally I wouldn't say a card is straight up trash. No disrespect to the athletes, but definitely like a particularly weak card, even for a fight night. So yeah, let me get right into it. The first fight of the night was Jack Hermansson versus Edmund Shabazian. I hit the nail on the head with this. Said going in, Jack Hermansson's probably like one of the best kept secrets in the UFC. This guy's fought in a bunch of different promotions. I think he was fighting in Bellator. He's a Norwegian-born Swede. Probably one of the best fighters all around in the UFC, no cap. This guy is great. I think he's got like a 96% finish rate. 90% plus finish rate in like Bellator and the UFC. Almost all of his wins in the UFC have come by way of finish. So Jack Hermansson's the real deal. This guy could be a title challenger sooner rather than later. Edmund Shabazian, I said going in, was going to get exposed going in. This guy was like a blue chip prospect, one of the blue chip prospects in the UFC, and now is coming off 2 losses where he's gotten exposed big time. Similar to Kevin Holland, what I was talking about in some previous videos. Kevin Holland, another like up and coming guy in the middleweight division who just has like no defensive grappling, like no defensive wrestling or jiu-jitsu. This guy Shabazian and Kevin Holland are fake whatever belts they are in BJJ, because they clearly have no jiu-jitsu skills, no defensive wrestling. Granted, both of them are at smaller camps, but man, the UFC doesn't do you any favors. If you're a young prospect, especially if you're like really more of a striker, a guy who wants to stay on the feet and kickbox, and you lose to a wrestler where you're just getting controlled, I mean, the very next fight, you're probably going to fight another wrestler to see if you're actually working on your game, which clearly Kevin Holland and Edmund Shabazian haven't. I've talked about it in other videos. You'll see these guys in the UFC who are black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they like lack skills on the ground that you would learn in like your first 2 weeks of Jiu-Jitsu. So yeah, not only are there a lot of fake black belts or fake whatever belts in the UFC, but You can tell when guys aren't working on grappling. Kevin Holland and Shabazian, pretty similar. They're like pretty explosive on the feet, but just have no grappling to speak of at all. And Shabazian's coming off 2 bad ground and pound losses where he's taken a lot of damage. So, yeah, I said going in, this was going to be a terrible fight for Shabazian. Like I said, Jack Hermansson, as someone who watches a lot of UFC and hits on 100% predictions, every week or every other week. Probably one of the best kept streaks in the UFC. Maybe the fact that he's from, Norway and Sweden. I don't know if he really speaks English 100%. He doesn't get talked about as much, but this guy Jack Hermansson's for real. I've watched his highlights over and over. It's some of the best highlights I've seen in the UFC. He's like a real wizard on the ground with submissions, has a nasty guillotine, and maybe has the best ground and pound we've seen in the last 2 years in terms of damage. Obviously, Khabib, who retired recently, was like the recent last year's GOAT, was great at ground and pound, but it was kind of more volume with him, whereas Hermansson can have you on the ground for like 10 or 15 seconds and really finish the fight, has insane top game. So yeah, I can't say enough about Hermansson, and this guy Edmund Shabazian, man, needs to go to like a gym like ATT or like American Kickboxing Academy where they have like real credentialed wrestling coaches and jiu-jitsu coaches. Because, like, if you're just at some small camp where your head coach is, like, a striking coach, and you're not working on your wrestling at all, I mean, you're going to get cut from the UFC. There's so many credentialed grapplers, like D1 wrestlers and legit black belts, that the UFC's not just going to not book you against grapplers, so you can move up the rankings. So, yeah, this guy Shabazian's got to leave his camp straight up. I know Kevin Holland is going to start training part-time at AKA. That's something I was saying a few weeks ago. He needs to go to a camp like that where they have real wrestling coaches and real jiu-jitsu coaches. I hope this channel starts getting some views, because that's a situation I called out exactly. If you're a dynamic striker who just can't keep the fight standing, then you need to go to somewhere like ATT or American Kickboxing Academy. I know Francis Ngannou went to like Extreme Couture, which has like a good wrestling program, wrestling coaches. So yeah, the shit isn't Bellator or some smaller promotion where you can get away with having no takedown defense and no like defensive jiu-jitsu off the bottom. And you can tell when guys aren't working on their grappling, man. Like I said, Kevin Holland is air quotes a black belt in BJJ, and guy doesn't know how to shrimp or go to a hip and push off. It's like you take him down once and the fight's over. So, yeah, I called that one exactly. Hermansson really did a lot of damage to Shabazian. The guy's really got to leave that shitty MMA gym he's at and go somewhere for real. Because otherwise, if he loses one more like that, he's going to get cut from the UFC 100%. So, yeah, featherweight, I predicted this one. I had Ricardo Ramos. I thought it was going to be a knockout or sub. This fight wasn't that entertaining. It was okay. It was kind of back and forth. It was a decision, kind of a drawn-out decision. Ramos is like trying to grapple. Bill Algeo is trying to keep the fight standing. Speaking of another guy who has shit defensive wrestling, I mean, this guy Ricardo Ramos, it wasn't his best performance, but he got, I think, double-digit takedowns or something close to that. And typically, with MMA judging, if you get like, let's say, 6 to 8 takedowns or double digits straight up, you're probably going to win the decision because you're just throwing a guy around and ragdolling him, So, yeah, not necessarily the most entertaining fight. These guys were, like, pretty evenly matched, but Ramos got the decision and looked good out there. So I predicted that one correctly. Next up, we had Felicia Spencer versus Norma Dumont. I did not predict this one correctly. I had Felicia Spencer, who looked really good against Amanda Nunes in her last fight. This one was okay, too. This one was a little more entertaining than Ramos and Algeo, but certainly not a barn burner. It was all right. Dumont got the win. This wasn't exactly the most exciting card. It was all decisions except one, which kind of sucks sometimes. But this heavyweight fight was actually really good between Justin Tafa and Jared Vandera. I had this knockout Tafa, so I didn't predict that one correctly, but this one was a banger to watch. Both guys were like all cut up and bloody and throwing big shots until the final bell. I think it got fight of the night and fight of the month, which it definitely deserved because this fight was one of the better ones in the last few weeks, if not the last few months. It was really fun to watch. I think it kind of speaks to the primal side of MMA fans, and both guys are just eating massive shots, massive damage, and are still swinging. So that was a great fight to watch. Heavyweight, for whatever reason, hasn't been that entertaining recently. There haven't been like too many highlight real knockouts in these heavyweight fights, so sometimes they're kind of slower decisions, but this fight was pretty sick. And then, I predicted this one correctly. It was Yan Xiaonan versus Carlos Esparza. Again, another UFC fighter, clearly a shit defensive wrestling and grappling. Carlos Esparza took her to the ground and did a massive amount of ground and pound. I wouldn't be surprised if this woman, Yan Xiaonan's out for a while. But again, like I keep saying, I mean, Carlos Esparza's like maybe the most credentialed like woman wrestler in UFC history. She's got a ton of legit wrestling credentials. I was looking it up. She started wrestling in high school, wrestled in college. I think she was like an all-American wrestler for women's in college. So again, man, the UFC is really like a very grappling heavy promotion. So like, I don't know if you're just like a kickboxer, go to Bellator or something, because you're going to be fighting these real wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys. Next up, we had bantamweight, Cody Garbrandt versus Rob Font. I predicted this one on the head. Cody Garbrandt's completely washed up, a real one-hit wonder in my opinion. He was undefeated and won the belt, and since then has done pretty much fuck all. He's 1-4. In his last 5, if he wasn't a former champion, he'd probably be cut. I think if he loses one more, the UFC should just cut him, because he's kind of a one-dimensional fighter. He has like a ton of punching power for like 135, but like that's his entire game plan, despite being at a good camp, Team Alpha Male in California. So I don't know. Fight fans have been saying for years this guy has shit fight IQ, and I'd agree. He looked a little bit better. He didn't get knocked out like he has in the last few fights, but Cody Garbrandt is trash in my opinion. He's washed. He's 1-4 in his last 5. It's like unheard of to still be in the UFC. I know he's a fan favorite. I guess he's marketable because his looks and shit. He has a bunch of cool tattoos, but guy fucking sucks, dude. And Rob Font had a good performance, but I think he played it kind of safe a few times throughout the fight, especially since Cody Garbrandt definitely doesn't have the best chin. I thought Font could have gone out there and been a little more aggressive and finished the fight. I mean, it was a 5-round dominant decision, but I would have liked to see him really go for the finish. He was close to finishing the fight a few times and decided to play it safe, which, good on him, but bantamweight is stacked, man. Just because you beat Cody Garbrandt, I don't know if this gets, like, Font a title shot. I know Dillashaw and Sandhagen are fighting, too. I think that's the number one contender spot, because, like, Rob Font, yeah, that was a good win, but Cody Garbrandt sucks, and his most recent other win is against Marlon Moraes, who also kind of sucks now and doesn't have a chin. So, yeah, you're beating former title challengers and champs, but talking about guys on their back end, I think that aside from Aljamain Sterling fighting Peter Yan again, that Dillashaw Sandhagen is really the number one contender fight. So Font, I think, will have to fight like 1 or 2 more times to get that title shot. Bantamweight is stacked. You know, certain divisions in the UFC, you can't just sit and get a title shot. The UFC doesn't really reward that. So, yeah, Font, if he knocked out Cody Garbrandt in like the first round, I would say the title shot's his, but it was a relatively safe decision against a guy who I don't think very high of, and neither do other MMA fans. So, yeah. Let me run through. This fight card has a lot of no names or deeper guys, no disrespect. So I'll try to run through this as quickly as possible. I'll have a significantly more in-depth breakdown next week when I preview 263, which has like 2 title fights and like Damian Maia on there, Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz, Paul Craig versus Jamal Hill. So 263 is stacked. This Rozenstruik versus Sakai card is pretty dog. So let me just run through it quick. I was trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter just for the sake of them being more digestible. So yeah, at middleweight we have Tom Breeze versus Antonio Arroyo. I like Tom Breeze in that one. Middleweight, Dusko Taradovic versus Gregory Rodriguez. I'll go Taradovic. I'll go finish by those two fights. Tom Breeze is a real tough guy. Dusko Taradovic, I'll say finish there. Welterweight, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Miguel Baeza. Santiago Ponzinibbio at one point was like one of the blue chip prospects in the welterweight division. I think he had some crazy health problems. I think he sat out a full 2 or 3 years, and the ring rust showed. I think he got knocked out in his last fight, but he looked really stiff and his timing looked super off. I think he had to sit out an absurd amount of time. So I think this is going to be a bounce back fight for Santiago. He's an Argentinian fighter. Like I said, at one point he was like expect to be a future title challenger in a few fights. And I forget what the issue was, but he maybe sat out for like 2 or 3 full years or close to it. Regardless of COVID, I think he had some medical problems before then. So ring rust showed, but I mean he's 28-4 in MMA, which is like a pretty good record for a younger guy. So yeah, I'll go Santiago Ponzinibbio by finish. Next up, we have Roman Dolidze versus Loreno Staropoli. I'll go Roman Dolidze by finish. I'm hoping there's a lot of finishes on this card for entertainment's sake, because the previous week's Font versus Garbrandt was almost all decisions, right? So, and then heavyweight, we have Walt Harris versus Marcin Tybura. Marcin Tybura is a Polish guy. I think he won like 4 or 5 fights last year. Let me look that up real quick. He won an absurd amount of fights last year by just being super active. He was one of the guys who kind of like capitalized off COVID and fought nonstop. Let me pull this up real quick. Marcin Tybura. Let me see his 2020. Yeah, shit, he fought 3 times in 2020 and won all 3 fights. It's huge for his his bank account. But yeah, I'll go Tybura here. He's 21-6. Walt Harris is 13-9, which it's like a pretty bad record for MMA. Next up, heavyweight, we have Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Augusto Sakai. I'm going to go Sakai in this fight. Rozenstruik's coming off 2 losses, one to Francis Ngannou, one to Cyril Gane. That was a snooze fest. The fight against Ngannou, I mean, he got knocked out in the first round, but it happens to almost everyone Francis fights, so no problem there. But in his previous fight against Cyril Gane, he looked like super gun-shy and afraid to really throw, which is usually the sign of like kind of a shot fighter if they're not even trying to win the fight. And Augusto Sakai was a guy who was probably like 1 or 2 wins from a title shot or being like a real top contender before he lost to Overeem. I think it's his only loss in the UFC is to Alistair Overeem. So I like Sakai a lot. I think he's got like legit BJJ black belt credentials and Muay Thai kickboxing credentials. So I like Sakai a lot. Sakai is probably some of the best kicking game in the UFC for a heavyweight. He's got like really flexible hips. Guy can throw all kinds of different kicks and head kicks, which is kind of unusual for a heavyweight to really be able to rip like pretty consistent body and head kicks, no problem from like any position. So I like Sakai in that fight. Let me run through my predictions, just summarize, and then we'll end this video, and then I'll go more in depth for UFC 263 when we have like two titles on the line. So middleweight, I'm gonna go Breeze, Todorovic, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Roman Dolidze, Marcin Tybura, and Augusto Sakai. Let's see how we do next week. I think I'm feeling pretty strong in this card. Hopefully I hit on like 80% or 100%. I'm gonna try to catch the highlights or stream a little bit of it on my phone or something while I'm out back in New York. But yeah, I'll go a little bit more in depth for 263 when there's some more notable fighters in the card. For whatever reason, the UFC decided to put some real obscure guys on this card, but it happens. Sometimes before or after title fights, the cards will be like pretty weak, no disrespect to the fighters themselves, but yeah. Let's see. I feel confident about this fight night, though, on my predictions. Hopefully I hit on like 80 or 100%. And hopefully I get some more views soon, because I've been hitting good on my predictions. The Kevin Holland situation where he's like going to AKA part-time, he's probably going to switch to them full-time. I called that exactly right. And I've hit on 100% of the title fights I've predicted so far. So, yeah, let's see. If you like the content, like and subscribe. If you have any feedback, put them in the comments below. And I'll see you next week.